Orlando is of course famous for its theme parks and family-friendly attractions. But if you're looking for something a little off the beaten path, consider checking out some of the area's best roadside attractions. In the 1920s and 30s, as Florida's population grew and more people began to travel by car, a number of new roadside attractions sprung up along the state's highways. These oddball places broke up the long journey and allowed visitors to see something interesting. Cypress Gardens made its debut in the mid-1930s, becoming famous for its water ski shows. By the end of the decade, Marineland had opened south of St. Augustine. This oceanside marine park was one of the first places in the world where visitors could swim with dolphins. New quirky attractions continued to spring up around the state throughout the 50s and 60s as Florida's tourism industry just kept growing. But the rise of the modern theme park in the 70s and 80s marked the beginning of the end for many of the smaller attractions. They just weren't able to keep up with the times, and travelers would pass them by on the way to Disney. Fortunately for those nostalgic for a simpler time, a surprising number of classic roadside attractions are still open and continue to attract visitors from all over the world. On today's episode, we begin a new series highlighting the best roadside attractions near Orlando. The first installment covers everything from vibrant gardens and deep springs to vintage landmarks and even some newer places you can't miss. All of that and so much more straight ahead from Central Florida. Dominating one of the largest hills in this part of the state is the Florida Citrus Tower. The 226-foot tall structure opened in 1956 as a tribute to the region's citrus industry.
The highest observation point in the state, it overlooks scenes of unbelievable beauty. The Citrus Tower, they say in Claremont, was built by tourism and vitamin C. Located in the heart of Florida's orange and grapefruit country, the tower gives visitors an unusual perspective for their first look at the famous groves.
Visitors can still take an elevator ride to the tower's glass-enclosed observation deck for 360-degree views of lakes and rolling hills. From up here, you can sit down and enjoy a cup of joe while watching the traffic down below. Next door to the Citrus Tower is another classic, the President's Hall of Fame. This roadside attraction has been educating visitors on U.S. presidential history for decades. Most impressive is the miniature White House, an entirely handmade model that has continued to evolve since 1962. I'm right now outside of one of Florida's vintage roadside attractions, dating back a century. George Turner purchased 6 acres of land, including a shallow lake which he had drained to form his private sunken garden. After planting a variety of citrus fruits and exotic plants, he started charging visitors a nickel to stroll through the lush landscape. Turner bumped up the price to 24 cents after fencing in the garden a few years later. By the 1950s and 60s, Sunken Gardens was one of the state's top 10 commercial attractions. The gardens are now operated by the city of St. Petersburg and maintained with the help of volunteers. If you're looking for a truly unique breakfast experience, look no further than the Old Spanish Sugar Mill inside De Leon Springs State Park. As soon as you step inside this historic mill-turned-restaurant, you'll be transported back in time. What really sets this restaurant apart is that each table has its own griddle, allowing folks to cook their own pancakes right at the table. Watching the batter sizzle and bubble on the griddle is a fun and interactive way to enjoy breakfast, and the pancakes themselves are absolutely delicious. After breakfast, take a stroll around De Leon Springs State Park and take in the natural beauty of the area. Covering more than 600 acres, the park is home to a large natural spring that pumps out 20 million gallons of water every day. The water stays a comfortable 72 degrees year-round. At the end of this dirt path, the tree canopy opens up to reveal a 30-acre oasis home to a Buddhist monastery. The White Sands Buddhist Center is open daily, dawn till dusk, with meditation services held every Sunday morning. Visitors come from all over to see 3 of the largest granite statues of the Buddha in Florida. We first came here more than 5 years ago when this spot was not on anyone's radar. The statues are still just as amazing to see in person now as they were then. Whatever your beliefs, the serenity you find by walking the grounds or stopping for a few minutes to sit by the reflecting pond can't be denied. I consider White Sands to be one of the most serene places on the Space Coast. Up to 100 people a day visit White Sands during peak times. An offering plate is never passed here. Donations, though, are welcome. One of the state's most enduring roadside tourist attractions is Wachee Springs. Since the 1940s, visitors have descended into the underwater theater to marvel at young mermaids as they perform an aquatic ballet. Performers still use air tubes to breathe and, depending on the show, demonstrate what it's like to eat and drink underwater. In addition to mermaids, you might see manatees when you take the boat tour or if you decide to rent a kayak for a few hours. There's also a water park that's open daily during the summer season. Wachee Springs is located at the intersection of State Road 50 and Highway 19, about an hour drive north of Tampa. Get an up-close and personal look at the Sunshine State's most famous residence at Gatorland, one of Florida's early roadside attractions that opened in 1949. Home to thousands of alligators, crocodiles, and other forms of wildlife, this 110-acre theme park and preserve is both entertaining and educational. Learn more about these amazing and often misunderstood creatures through a number of informational and engaging shows. "50 miles west of Orlando, in the heart of a large state forest, is the Richland General Store and Post Office, a historic landmark dating back to the early 1900s. The interior is filled with vintage items, including an old-fashioned cash register and retro products like toys that are available to purchase. Choose from a selection of hard candy sticks and cool off with a refreshing soda. The General Store has been lovingly restored by descendants of the man who built it a century ago.
All the metal inside and outside is original, all the doors are original, and everything we carry is time period. We make sure it's within the time period that it would have been in a store in the 2030 time period.
The Richland General Store is open 7 days a week, 10 till 4. Founded as an art colony in the late 1930s, the Maitland Art Center is actually a collection of museums that focus on everything from art and heritage to the history of the telephone. A number of unique structures on the property, but the biggest surprise for many is the Mayan courtyard and outdoor chapel, often utilized for weddings. There's a charge to visit the museums, but the spaces outside are free to experience. One of Florida's early roadside attractions was right here in Vero Beach and went by the name McKee Jungle Gardens. In the 1920s, Waldo Sexton and his business partner Arthur McKee purchased this tropical oasis. Their plan was to clear the property for a citrus grove. But the natural beauty of this place was deemed too special in its native state to disturb. So the men brought in a landscape architect to design the basic infrastructure of streams, ponds, and trails. Over time, they had assembled one of the most outstanding collections of water lilies and orchids in the world. By the 1940s, more than 100,000 visitors were stopping by every year. Attendance decreased in the 70s, and much of the property was sold off to developers. 18 acres, the heart of the original attraction, were preserved, and today this attraction is being appreciated by a whole new generation. Now known as McKee Botanical Garden, it's open Tuesday through Sunday. Admission is $15 for adults. Silver Springs in Ocala has a long and really cool history as a tourist destination. Curious folks began visiting the springs in the mid-19th century, and the area quickly became a popular roadside attraction for travelers passing through Florida. In the early days, visitors could take a ride on a glass-bottom boat that was essentially a wooden skiff with a large pane of glass in the bottom. This allowed passengers to see the underwater world below without getting wet. Over time, the boats became more sophisticated, and knowledgeable captains provided interesting commentary about the springs, their unique ecosystem, and fascinating history as an attraction. Today, the half-hour glass-bottom boat ride is still the highlight at the park. Canoes, kayaks, and paddleboards are also available for rental, and there are hiking trails here as well. A restaurant, ice cream shop, and souvenir store can be found on the property. That's it, our look at some of the best roadside attractions near Orlando. Be on the lookout for future installments in this series and let us know in the comments which roadside attractions you would like to see. We have travel tips, maps, and links to the places mentioned in our videos on our website. Check it out for your trip planning needs. One last thing before we go, we make lots of travel guides from Florida and beyond. Take a look at some of our previous videos in our archives. From Central Florida, see you next time.